Good afternoon. My name is Charles Tipshirani. I'm a practicing attorney in Montreal. I've been a lawyer for 27 years. In the last 10 years, I was specializing in AML matters. More particularly, I handle consulting and representation for money service businesses in Montreal and in Quebec, actually. I've founded AMLC.ca in order to assist these MSBs in complying to the legislative requirements. And my firm can also represent you, should it be required, in front of FINTRAC, the AMF in Quebec, and any court across Canada. The purpose of this video presentation is to discuss the new AMF law. AMF is Autorité des marchés financiers. We call it the AMF law because they're the ones that are going to be applying the law in Quebec to Quebec-based money service businesses. I'd like to start with some general information about the law. Contrary to what it appears, this law is not there to eradicate or to eliminate criminal behavior. That's what we have the FINTRAC law. This law is basically to collect more taxes for the government. It's as simple as that. It's a way to control and prohibit tax evasion. You will see as we go along that a lot of the information that they require to obtain a license is information relating to the operation of the MSB and to some of its clients. And you will see that it's not necessarily to eradicate criminal activity. It may become a consequence of it, but the objective of the law is very clear. It's to avoid or eliminate tax evasion. The new law starts April 1st, 2012. You have 6 months to conform to the new rules, but I suggest that you start today. You have to prepare now to be ready for when the new law starts, and you will see why in a few minutes, because if you're not ready, a lot of you will be taken by surprise. If you need any help, please contact us at info@amlc.ca, or you can call me at 514-285-1247, and I'll be very pleased to send you a copy of this presentation. Now, who does this law affect, or who does it deal with? Well, first of all is the currency exchange offices, and in also the money transfer businesses, the organizations or companies that issue and redeem travelers' checks or money orders, check cashing business. This is new. This is the first time in Quebec that check cashing business is being legislated and being controlled by a law. As you recall, or as you probably know, FINTRAC law excludes check cashing. So check cashing is the first time that they are governed by this law, and obviously operators of ATM machines. And if you rent a space in which an ATM machine is located, and the machine is not yours, you rent a machine, but you load the money in the machine, you need a license. License requirements, the first thing is that you'll have a license. You'll need a license for each service that you will render. So that's $600 per license. And if you are a currency exchange office who does wire transfers and cashes checks, you're going to need a license for each one of those services. And this is irregardless of whether or not that service is your principal business. I'll give you the example of a corner store operation, the dépanneurs in Quebec. If you happen to do currency exchange as a side business to increase your income, you will also need a license. There's an enormous list of documents that you have to provide when you apply for the license. I suggest that you start verifying these documents now. Don't wait till April 1st. Make sure that you have these documents. Make sure that they're all in order and that they are signed and sealed and they're ready to be sent, because you don't want to wait until the last minute to start finding or looking for these documents. If you contact us, we will provide you with a list of all the documents that you will need to file your application. New aspect of this law is the creation of a respondent. Just think of it as the compliance officer. But the respondent has a little bit more obligations than a compliance officer has under the FINTRAC Act or FINTRAC laws. The respondent is the person who actually makes the application. He has to be a director, an officer, a partner. He has to be 18 years or older. He has to be a resident of Quebec, and he has to be the person that the AMF will contact for any follow-up information relating to your permit, your license, or to the operations of the business. He has to be accessible. Also, he has to obtain a security clearance certificate. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but that's a very important criteria in order to be qualified as a respondent. We recommend that the respondent makes the application, handles it, signs it, but once that's taken care of, he delegates his responsibilities to the compliance officer of the company, and you will see it'll be a lot smoother in your operations. If you contact us, we have a form that you can fill in, and you can delegate that authority to the compliance officer once you've applied for your license. Security clearance certificate. This is new, and I must admit, as an attorney, I find it very concerning. A security clearance certificate will have to be obtained for every director, shareholder, officer, for anyone who has a controlling interest in the business, any of the lenders of the business that are not institutional lenders. I'm not talking about banks. I'm talking about someone who lends the business money or even invests in the business without being a shareholder, officer, or director. That person will have to be identified. You'll have to give information on that person, and you'll also have to obtain a security clearance certificate for that person. Your branch managers and everyone involved in the day-to-day operations of the business will also need a security clearance certificate. That means a cashier has to obtain a certificate. Someone who handles, counts the money, someone who transports the money for you needs a security clearance certificate. Someone who cleans your office will not need one, obviously. Once all the information is obtained by the AMF, they will send on each one of the applicants, they will send this information to the Quebec Police Force and the local police force. They will investigate on everyone identified in that form, and they will issue the security clearance certificate. What is disconcerting is the definition of what it takes to get a security clearance certificate. You have to be of good moral character. What does that mean? You mustn't have connections to individuals who are recognized in organized crime or that are engaged in money laundering or drug trafficking. Not a person who is convicted of it, not a person who's been found guilty of one of these offenses. As long as you're connected to someone who engages in this, you will not get a security certificate. So if your uncle or brother, excuse me, or a very good friend of yours, an associate in another business, has nothing to do with the MSB business, is engaged in some kind of illegal activities such as money laundering or drug trafficking or organized crime, you won't get your certificate. That's going to lead to a lot of litigation, I find. I think that they should have left it simply to anyone who has been convicted of one of those offenses, but that's not the case. A new aspect of this law also is the verification of identity. You will have to identify all of your clients, and what's new in this law, contrary or compared to the FINTRAC Act or FINTRAC laws, is that you'll have to obtain not only the client's name, date of birth, address, you'll have to obtain their telephone numbers, you'll have to obtain their profession and or their business activity. You will do this every time that there's going to be a transaction of one or more transactions of $3,000 or more in the same day for a currency exchange, one or more funds transfers in totaling $1,000 in the same day, or one or more transactions totaling $3,000 for the redemption of traveler's checks, money orders, or bank drafts in the same day. So you're going to have to modify your systems. Right now, the way you operate is that you can do more than 1 or 2 or 3 transactions in one day for currency exchange or wire transfers. The threshold now is $10,000 or more in the same day. You'll have to reduce that threshold to $3,000 for currency exchange and $1,000 for wire transfers. So all of your systems have to be modified to reflect that reality. What's even more shocking now is that third parties have to be identified in the same way. As you operate today, all you need is the information on a third party. Now you need all of the information on the third party. You need a picture identification, and you're also going to need a proxy document. Now this is absurd in my opinion. You're going to have to ask the person who's before you to provide you with a letter or a document authorizing them to act on the part of that third party. Take the example of someone that comes to your counter and says, I'd like to exchange $3,000 for my wife, my neighbor, my cousin, my friend. They're going to have to provide you with a document. And what are you going to do with this document? You're going to have to keep a file of it, open a file for every client that comes to your counter and identifies themselves as acting on behalf of a third party. This is simply going to complicate your operations unnecessarily. How are you going to identify them? That's very simple, and you do this already. You need one picture ID card that is issued by a government or a government authority with a person's name and his date of birth. Address and other information is not necessary. And if it's a company, you need to confirm their existence by going on the government register to verify that they are in fact in operations. Non-face-to-face transactions, you will also have to verify the identity of these individuals, and somehow they seem to simplify the process. You will have to identify a non-face-to-face transaction you can do so by using a canceled check. Have your client issue you a check with their name and address on it, take that check in your name, deposit it, and once that check clears, you've identified them for future non-face-to-face transactions. This is totally new and another cumbersome part of the law. You will also have to identify all the co-contracting parties that you do business with in your day-to-day operations of your MSB. So your landlord, your money transport company, Brinks, or whoever you use to carry the currency, you'll have to identify them in the same manner as you would a client, which means you need a picture ID issued by a government authority with the name and the date of birth of the persons involved in that operations. You have to keep a record. You have to build a file on all the co-contracting parties that you do business with. What's interesting is that you only have to identify them and keep this record. You don't have to provide this information. So far, you don't have to provide this information to the AMF. Records, books, registers, and other information. You already do this. I mean, a lot of this information you collect and you compile, things like accounting registers, things like a record of the officers, employees of the business. What's new is that you are going to have to identify the sources of liquidity. That's a very interesting new concept. The law does not define how you do that or what exactly do they refer to, what do they mean by sources of liquidity, but I assume that it means your cash flow. You'll have to identify how much cash you have in your business and how does it circulate in your operations. I guess the purpose of that is to make sure that you have just enough cash to operate and you're not using someone else's cash and you're not declaring it to the government authority. And another document that you're going to have to keep a record of is called the voucher. You already have this in your day-to-day operations. It's not different than what you do already. You have to keep a record of every transaction that you conduct in your business. Unlike the federal law, you're going to be obliged to keep a record of every single transaction. There's no threshold. So if you exchange $20 US or you exchange $20,000 US or you wire $100, you will have to keep a voucher containing all of the information that you normally do keep already: name, address, a destination, a currency, method of payment, how much information was provided to you, all the information that was provided to you by the client for the purposes of that transaction. And now lastly, and the most surprising new addition to this law is that before you change ownership in the business, you have to obtain the prior consent of the AMF 30 days before the change of ownership. So if you want to sell shares in your business or you want to change the control, even if you want to change control between shareholders, 3 shareholders, 1 shareholder sells out, wants to leave the business, you have to provide the AMF 30 days prior notice before this change takes into effect. Obviously, the new shareholder, if a new shareholder is involved or a new director is involved, then he will have to obtain a security clearance certificate like the previous owners did. And if you require any further information regarding this new legislation, please feel free to contact us at info@amlc.ca or at 514-285-1247. Charles Tibshirani. Thank you.